And I understand the arguments about fracking and about this, but we're living in a crisis in the world where things aren't going to get very much better as far as I can foresee in the Persian Gulf. Some people involved in the conflict, some of the Israeli government, want just to cause chaos. Other people obviously want peace, but they want to cause as much chaos as they can, including wrecking the oil fields in one of the greatest oil producers of the world, so biggest oil producers. So we're not going to be in a place where oil is getting cheaper all the time or where it's easy to live without oil.
Okay. Now, the past is a foreign country. They do things differently there, except for when they don't. Because every week, the historian Ian Wilson joins me for our regular feature, If Only We'd Known, explaining why actually the present rather closely resembles the past. And today, we're talking about North Sea oil and how it shaped Thatcherite Britain in the 1980s. Ian Wilson, hello.
Hello.
Thanks for being with us. So look, in the early 1980s, the UK was in recession. Yes. How did North Sea oil revenue help Thatcher implement her radical and often unpopular free market reforms?
Well, because after, as you say, we were in recession, we were a country that had been deeply in debt for well over 10 years, perhaps 25 years. And about 5 years before Thatcher got in, they discovered that it was possible to drill oil in the North Sea. And in those days, the Labour government, the man in charge of energy was Tony Benn. Mm-hmm. And you don't often hear the words Tony Benn and the phrase perfectly sensible in the same sentence. But he had a perfectly sensible scheme that any surplus, as it were, profits from North Sea oil should be put into a kind of government fund, which is what they did in Norway. It's what they've done in nearly all the oil-producing countries of the world. Saudi Arabia, for instance, when it discovered oil in 1930, the government takes 98% of all the profits from oil. It doesn't all go to rich individuals.
Yeah, sure.
But Thatcher, because of her doctrines, her belief that everything should be in the free market, everything should be in the hands of free market capitalists, wouldn't touch that with a barge pole. But the answer to your question is vast amounts of money, of course, were made almost instantly as oil was drilled.
Well, I mean, there must have been euphoria. It's like a nation sort of finding a treasure chest under the bed.
And also, not only a nation, but it's like a person who's normally been always slightly broke, suddenly winning the lottery.
So Britain became a net exporter of oil in the 80s. The pound soared, but that wasn't altogether good for us.
Well, it wasn't. I mean, in European economic circles, they talked about something called the Dutch disease, because the Dutch had got there slightly before us, and they didn't do any state regulation of the income, and their currency soared, and all their exports were knocked for six, and so there was very high unemployment in Holland. And in a way, you could argue, the Dutch, certainly some of them do argue, that it was a disaster for them to have discovered so much oil. Now, with Mrs. Thatcher, it was slightly different because she wanted high unemployment. She wanted to weaken. I don't want to sound like a Trotskyite, but she wanted to weaken the working classes. She wanted to weaken the unions. And she wanted, basically, to replace the manufacturing industry on which the wealth of this country had always been built in favour of service industries, finance, and so on. Mm-hmm. So it was actually it corresponded to all her economic, monetary views.
But when we talk about the economic boom of the Thatcher years, and I appreciate that whatever answer you're about to give is going to be controversial, but how much of that really was about Thatcher's, sort of bold vision for how an economy should work and becoming, sort of monetarism and all that, and how much of it was just about this influx of billions through oil?
I think the second thing is true. I think that it surprised even her and her supporters how much money was being made. And as I say, for doctrinal reasons, they couldn't tolerate it. They couldn't collect any of it themselves for the government. But there was a lot of money sloshing around, and there were a lot of rich people sloshing around in consequence, in spite of what we've just said about the collapse of manufacturing and the collapse of exports.
Okay. Turning to today, so in the 80s, we were energy self-sufficient because of all this oil.
We were totally. It's an extraordinary thing to sit here and say. We were self-sufficient.
Yeah. Well, today we import a huge amount of our gas. We're reeling from price spikes caused by the war in Iran, after having spent so many years reeling from price spikes caused by the war in Ukraine. How did we go from being an energy titan, an exporter of oil, to being so vulnerable to global shocks?
Well, a number of things happened. I mean, partly what you've said, that there was a very strong suspicion that if we got too much oil out and the money was spilling around, the pound would always remain high, and we wouldn't be competitive with other nations. And so the government put about what was basically a lie, namely that the oil resources were extremely limited and we mustn't get too much out. That's untrue. We now realise there's almost limitless oil.
What, still, you'd say? Yes.
No, there's more than we've ever got out before.
Right. I keep reading that it's incredibly hard to get to because it's in weird honeycomb formations and stuff.
Yeah, but they're bound to say that, aren't they? But also there's a vast amount of oil in Yorkshire, in Essex, in all sorts of places. In Dorset, it would ruin lots of beautiful natural beauty spots. But so, we are an oil-rich nation, but for various political and social reasons, we didn't want to be in the 80s and 90s. Another reason was that there was this terrible catastrophe, which you probably know about, in 1988.
Oh, Piper Alpha.
The Piper Alpha disaster. About 100 miles out to sea from Aberdeen, the Piper Alpha oil rigs exploded. It was partly because, again, I don't want to blame everything on Mrs. Thatcher and the Thatcherites, but rather than having it government supervised, 4 different companies owned those oil rigs. Nobody was really supervising the safety of them. The same thing happened, if you remember, in the first few years after they privatised the railways. There were a lot of railway accidents. It was partly that there were some men, poor chaps, who got killed in the explosion themselves, who were very negligent. It was discovered afterwards in the inquiry. It was partly that bad things just happen.
Well, and did this? I remember it well. Partly because of my sort of family's involvement in Scottish politics at the time.
Scottish.
But did this change the British mood towards oil extraction?
Think
it's dirty, it's dangerous.
It made people think, oh hell, we can't. It's too risky. And also, if you think of all the controversy over the coal miners, and gradually that was being phased out anyway, but a lot of people during the miners' strike, during Mrs. Thatcher's years, whatever side they took politically, they realised the incredible difficulty of being a worker, either in the oil industry or in the coal industry. And were we right to claim so much money with these victims in front of us? The people who, 150 men or something were blown sky high in this terrifying inferno.
There was a tremendously good documentary about it, actually, just last year, a 3-parter on the BBC, which really, sort of brought it all back. Look, so, bring us back to today then. Ed Miliband, he's currently standing firm on banning new exploration licenses in the North Sea.
And he claims, of course, it would take 10 years to get any oil out anywhere, these sort of things.
But, that's what Nick Clegg used to say about nuclear power stations, and look where we are now.
Precisely.
Yeah.
No, he's clearly a menace, Nick Clegg. Not Nick Clegg, Ed Miliband. And in the current state of things, any normal person, let's say coming from Mars or from some other country looking at us, would think, what on earth are you doing? Then you're buying oil from the Norwegians. The Norwegians are sitting on this extraordinary sovereign grant stuff that they've got, sovereign wealth, which is sort of trillions and trillions. Every single Norwegian is personally worth 340,000 American dollars. It's as if they got a huge pension pot, even the babies. Why on earth do we buy oil from the Norwegians? If we find it morally objectionable to take oil out of the North Sea, we wouldn't be buying it.
It would be expensive to extract, and there's a huge sort of environmental lobby, of which I myself am sometimes a part, that's against this kind of thing. It's similar to the argument from about fracking. It would be hugely politically contentious.
It would be contentious,
to launch into this,
and I understand the arguments about fracking and about this, but we're living in a crisis in the world where things aren't going to get very much better, as far as I can foresee, in the Persian Gulf. Some people involved in the conflict, some of the Israeli government, want just to cause chaos. Other people obviously want peace, but they want to cause as much chaos as they can, including wrecking the oil fields in one of the greatest oil producers of the world, so biggest oil producers. So we're not going to be in a place where oil is getting cheaper all the time, or where it's easy to live without oil.
Okay, so look, two more things about aspects of this I want to discuss with you. Just, I suppose both briefly. But firstly, as relates to Scottish politics.
Oh, yes.
Scottish nationalists are still furious about what happened with oil. In the 1980s, the slogan was "It's Scotland's oil," and there is this belief that Scotland could now be this rich, independent nation, much like Norway, had Thatcher not nicked the oil.
If you think of Scotland as a small, independent nation with a smaller population than Norway, then their pension pot, instead of being 340,000 each, it would be about 600,000 each. So, of course, they think that. Whether it works out, I'm not a sufficiently clever economist, or indeed an economist at all, to know. But if I were a nationalist, that would be one of the things that fueled my anger against England.
So the other aspect here is that, Ed Miliband, he does have big energy plans. He wants to basically replace what was once our situation with oil with renewables, with solar, with wind.
There's a bit of all our souls or hearts that sees what he's saying, and we would agree with him if things weren't different in the rest of the world. That's my view, anyway.
But the fact that the idea of us being energy self-sufficient, which almost everybody is in favour of, I think. You'd think one way of doing that is through renewables, but you're saying it still would be possible. Another way of doing that would be through oil.
Well, I would have thought one could do it with both until the world situation had died down a bit and calmed down a bit.
Ian Wilson, thank you very much indeed. Always great to have you here. Always
it's lovely
an education.
To be here, though it's a rather sobering thought.
Isn't it indeed? Yeah. Well, one day perhaps the black gold will start flowing again. And I don't mean Guinness. The Scottish version.
Look, drill, baby, drill.
Thank you, Ian Wilson.